Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of High Talks. Today we're going to be talking about distillation and extraction in the cannabis industry, and I'm joined by three amazing women. The first is Lilibel de la Puente, who is the co-founder and president of Beaker and Wrench, Taylor Engle, who is the editor of the Bluntness, and Jane Bowyer, who is the founder and creator of Hashfight, also known as Propane Jane. Hello ladies, welcome to High Talks.
Hello.
So we're going to go around, have a little intro for everyone. Taylor, why don't we start with you? Give us a little background on who you are and what your position is in the Bluntness and within the cannabis industry.
It's an honor to be on the show. I've written about it for the Bluntness before, so it's really cool to be on the other side of things. But yeah, so a little background on me. I always knew I wanted to be a writer since I was young, but I wasn't sure exactly where my focus was going to be. And then I've also been a cannabis consumer for quite a long time. I started consuming when I was in high school, and it's helped me for a various number of reasons over the years. So when I got into college, I continued down my journalism, communications, marketing road. And then my first role after I graduated college was actually at Weed Maps. I started with public relations at the company. And I had been a consumer, but I hadn't known anything about the industry, how it worked, or sort of really anything medicinal about the plant or like the scientific background of the plant. So I learned a ton at that role, just kind of working with the different teams, working with science and legal and government relations in my public relations role, and learning how to represent the company and how to work in legal cannabis. So from there, I kind of straight away, I went to work in fashion and kind of was writing all over the place for entertainment, news. But I kind of kept going back to cannabis on a freelance basis. Some people I had worked with at Weed Maps would, hire me out for random jobs. And then I actually started writing regularly for the Bluntness. That was my first kind of permanent writer position role for a cannabis publication. And that was back in 2020. So I started on with the Bluntness as a freelance writer, really got like a great relationship with the team there. And from there, have been fortunate enough to cover so many different areas of cannabis. I freelanced for a bunch of different websites and magazines like MG Magazine, MedMen, Green Bros, Grove Bags, kind of all over the place, just freelancing my way through the cannabis industry. And at this point, I've also done some public relations for cannabis brands. So I've kind of written all over the place, and I love it. As a consumer and a writer, I'm like a total advocate of the plant, and that kind of brings me to today.
Amazing. Love that. You've done a lot, which it's always great to learn a little bit more about you too. And like you said, you've covered past episodes of High Talks. I think you covered our prison reform one that we did sometime last year. So that was always great, and always appreciate the support, and happy to have you on here. Lilibel, why don't you give us a little background on you and what you've been doing with Beaker and Wrench?
Thank you so much for having me on the show. My name is Lilibel de la Puente. After 4 years in the US Navy, I went to college with my GI Bill, and I got a degree in chemistry. During that time, I was growing cannabis, and it was helping me a lot, and I just love the science of it. So I decided that I wanted to get into extraction, and so I studied chemistry. And I got a job in one of the first locally licensed labs in California as a chemist. During my time there, I was doing distillation, and that's kind of where my company got started, very organically, with Ace, my co-founder. And that's how Beaker and Wrench started.
Love that. And now, of course, you have also built a relationship with Jane and Jane Bowyer, and you have a very long-standing history. So it's great to have both of you on. Jane, give us a little bit of your background as well, and how you and Lilibel came about.
Okay. So I moved to Colorado in 2014. Had not really done anything with extraction. We had a couple of, little basement grow hero in Ohio, where I'm from. Proudly, Ohio proud. And at night, I started working at this grow to help with the harvest.
Okay.
And that harvest was done. They said, "You seem really interested in this equipment in the next room. do you want to learn about it? They had extraction equipment. And at the time in 2014, it might have been early 2015, they were one of very few grows in Colorado that they grew their own material and extracted. And I started running all of the product for this entire lab just very quickly, and came about knowing Lilibel in extraction and then moving forward to distillation and everything. There wasn't a lot of distillation at the time. It was just extraction. You extract, you make your product, that's it. And then all of a sudden, people start growing crappy weed, and there needs to be an outlet for it, right? And boom, there's a solution. And the solution is, obviously, I know distillation and white film had been around before cannabis, but that's how I was introduced to it. And Lilibel at the time, Beaker and Wrench was, as she said, organically. I think that's what you're talking about, modifying equipment that was already on the market, but could do better. Which is kind of how Hashfight came along, is me running a lot of equipment and seeing how I could do better. And and so now working for a company that I created, doing the fight for higher standards, in that we look at equipment, we review equipment, product, process, and are able to understand better how to make the equipment better. And together as a community, we all do better.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, I always like to, preface these conversations for anyone that's watching, and for, of course, my guests. Like, this show is meant for women to have the floor to be able to educate other people, hopefully other women within the cannabis space. So I think that these topics that you obviously all have expertise in are super important for us to talk about, especially as, more states start legalizing it. There's so many more patents coming out, and, all of the different documents everyone's got to file to have their own businesses, have their own farms, to, create accessories, whatever it might be. So I think being able to have High Talks represent those women. And I am a connoisseur. I do not know much other than, what weeds, put me to sleep, and what weeds make me nice and creative. So I am also a learner of all things. And I love these talks because I like to learn a little bit more about the industry as well. I think that, the more information that we have as a society, especially with women who are either have been already in the cannabis space or trying to get into it, these are powerful and empowering conversations for us to have. So in the sense of learning more, let's first talk about what is the distinction between extraction and distillation. Like you said, Jane, a lot of people were, I think you said, extracting and hadn't really, or vice versa, was it? I think it was
extracting. They were just extracting.
And not distillating. So what is the difference between that when it comes to, the weed process, growing weed, creating it, making the perfect strains, making it the best potency, maybe not the highest, because it's not always the best, but what is the difference between distillation and extraction?
Do you want me to answer that one?
If you want to start, and Lilibel.
Sure. Okay, I'll start with extraction. How's that? And then Lilibel can answer distillation.
Love that.
Okay, extraction is removing or dissolving, or there's a lot of different methods, right? There's alcohol, there's hydrocarbons, and then the really big one right now is what they call solventless, but it's really using water, the universal solvent, as a method of mechanically removing the trichome heads from a material to create a concentrate of cannabinoids, okay? Which put simply is taking all of the weed plants, right, or hemp plants, and removing things that you like from that plant and concentrating them for you to smoke, for you to put into tinctures, for you to put into edibles and any other form. So that isn't necessarily separating your cannabinoids and terpenes and stuff. So Lilibel can answer that one.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Jane's absolutely right. Extraction starts with raw plant material, and sometimes the quality of that plant material really matters for the final products in rosin and shatter and anything where you're going to have really good terps in your final product. That's going to be like a really good extraction process. And distillation is taking crude oil, which is usually butane or ethanol extracted, and refining it into what you'll find in like a vape pen. So that's distillate mixed in with some terps probably. And then also in food and beverage, you'll find that you'll have a more purified product unless you can taste the crude oil in it, in which case you'll know that they used crude oil in their product.
Yeah, not distillate.
Yeah, the distillate's not really supposed to have a strong smell or taste.
Okay. And what makes it unique within the cannabis industry versus, like you said, like alcohol, you can do the same thing with there. So what is like the uniqueness to the cannabis industry, and how has the distillation process been kind of started to be introduced and more commonly used in the cannabis industry?
Distillation is getting huge right now just because of food and beverage, I think. And so many people, including myself, don't want like a huge dose. So I consume beverages a lot.
Yeah.
And so I think that the more conservative people that are beginning to try cannabis are starting to consume. They may not know it's distillate based because it's, a food or beverage, but that's what they're consuming. And so I've seen a big uptick in that.
Extraction comes before distillation.
Okay.
When I was thinking about what Jess was asking, and I'm like, wait a minute, extraction comes first, distillation comes after. So a lot of times distillation, some people use distillation just to truly remove solvent, right, from your extract. It's technically you're distilling, right?
Right.
So there's a few steps in between that I guess we didn't talk about.
I know.
Well, so on your way to distillation, there's a couple more steps. Sometimes you have to remove the waxes from the oil in a process called winterization. And yeah, it's a pretty big, time-consuming, energy-intensive process that's a big part of extraction.
Like a falling film?
Yeah, it's kind of like a film. It's a heat pump based, and we got a patent for it, so it's exciting.
Oh, that's
what?
awesome.
That's amazing.
Hi.
And then some people would use like there's different types of distillation, right? So what Lilibel's company makes, what they're really well known for is a white film, and she can talk about that. But some people also use benchtop distillation, which is like the flask, and you heat it, and then your vapors come out, and then they recondense and things like that. And so some people use distillation post extraction, right after, to recapture those terpenes to be able to use in other products.
Okay. Going back, Lilibel, to what we were talking about in terms of what Beaker and Wrench does, and I'd love to get into a little bit more of your background too, because I know you were one of the first people in a lab in California, I believe it was, correct?
I was one of the first employees in the first locally licensed lab. There were lots of labs in Prop 215 and before that still are, but we had a local license in the city of Berkeley.
Okay, cool. And so what does that mean exactly when you think about like having that license and actually being able to be in the lab? What does that mean you're allowed to do?
So it meant that we had to kind of be the example for licensing, and there was it was a very nice lab. It was, state of the art, and they did everything to code. The fire marshal came in and all of that. So I was there from like day one. I mean, I literally built chairs, installed equipment. I was there, the drywall hadn't even gone up. So I definitely saw it all happen from like studs to lab. And that was quite the learning experience for me. So that was cool.
Okay. I love that.
What it was.
No, I love that. I think that's awesome. I have been having so many conversations with, women scientists that have been in the industry. And I think sometimes when we think about like the plan, we're thinking of it just coming out of the ground. And, maybe some people are like, oh, you just, I have old friends that are like, can't you just like, grind up a nug and put it in your brownie? And I'm like, no, that would be disgusting. And so I don't think people think of the scientific side of it. And again, like the weed industry has been a male dominated industry for years, at least from like an outside perspective. So having that inside look of like some of the women scientists that are behind, this plant and finding the best ways to use and process it, like that's important for people to see, especially the young girls that are trying to be scientists, so go scientists.
Yeah.
I think all of the good women or all of the good scientists I know are all women in this industry, actually, and mushrooms too.
Exactly. One of the main things you guys, when we first talked last week, and we're bringing up again today too, is the way people are consuming. And we talked about how from a distillation and extraction perspective, they're doing it more from like edibles and drinks and stuff like that. I know that Taylor, you had said yourself that you had been kind of seeing this trend going on. So from a news perspective in your research, what have you been seeing in the industry when it comes to more of the, I guess we're calling all of them edibles or drinkables or whatever they are.
Yeah, no, there's been like a huge shift towards beverages specifically, like edibles as well. And vapes are kind of back on the rise too, but drinks specifically are like the top performing product by far for like, I think the past 2 or 3 420s in a row, they've like far exceeded sales in the US and in Canada.
Okay.
And actually, after we talked about that, I was kind of thinking more about it and like digging into it because I've been doing a lot of research lately. I wrote a couple different articles about Gen Z consumers because they are like the 18 to 25 age range right now, and they're consuming cannabis more than like almost as much as millennials, which is pretty significant because they make up kind of a small percentage of consumers. But I also noticed that they consume, I think it's like 20% less alcohol than like generations before them. So they're kind of like, they're making this shift from alcohol to weed and like psychedelics as well. So that's kind of why I think, I mean, I don't know, I'm kind of just like making a guess here, but I have a feeling that's why like drinks are on the rise because it's like, okay, you go out, you want to socialize, you want to have a drink, but if you don't want to drink alcohol, it's so much better to have like a CBD or THC infused beverage in your hand.
And you can drink it anywhere. It's discreet, right? Like it's
exactly.
like, oh, look, I'm partying with everyone.
Yeah.
I
think like Lilibel said earlier too, is like you said, the discreetness to it. The more conservatives are leaning towards that because they're not ready to be out in these streets, with a joint in hand, like with the cigarette. But they're down to like, tee-hee in the corner at parties and break off a piece of a brownie or have a sip of a drink or something.
Yeah. And I think that's why vapes might be back on the rise too, because it's kind of just this move towards like more people are becoming comfortable with cannabis. But because of that, it's kind of going from being this thing where most people are smoking joints or hitting bongs to like consuming in a much wider variety of ways and like much more discreet ways and portable too. It's just like a lot easier to grab a drink or grab a pack of gummies than to have to get like all your things to roll up if you're going out for the day.
Yeah. And I know, Lilibel, you said something about containing, or controlling the amount of THC that's in there. So as far as drinks are concerned, like, is there a specific limit that people can have in their drinks? Like, are you only going to get drinks that have a maximum THC of X amount, or is that, can that be different as well?
So I'm not like a super expert on the regulations, but what I've seen is that the maximum serving is 10 milligrams.
Okay.
So
that's amazing.
I think it's actually higher in Colorado, Jane, just saying.
I'm going to have to look because the only medicated beverage I know of, because my friend works in their lab and didn't even meet them in cannabis, a total random occurrence, but is Dram CBD.
Yeah, Dram.
Oh, yes.
And I can't imagine if I don't ever want to eat. I do like the 2.5 milligram gummies or something because I can't handle my weed, really, essentially.
The gummies right now, I'm like taking a tiny bite of my gummy every day so that I can get 2 milligrams. I'm really waiting for that 2 milligram gummy that I can just eat
I'll
safely.
make you some, girl.
Love that.
I got you.
Speaking of this problem you're talking about, when I was in Toronto recently, I had a cannabis drink that was 10 milligrams. It was carbonated, so I can't like shake it up prior to. So I open it, I drink it, all the oils on the top. They didn't homogenize it properly. I got so high.
Oh no. And it wasn't like nano encapsulated or something like that. It was oily.
But if it was, then it wouldn't have been floating at the top.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Interesting. This might be a controversial question because we're all in different areas, but who do you all feel like, whether it's state or coast or region, because I know, Jane, you're technically in the Midwest, Central Time, sort of. But who do you think has been
Mountain time.
going in the right direction as far as introducing cannabis into their cities, you know, how they're doing with businesses and all that stuff? Let's start with you, Jane.
Who do I think's doing a good job?
Yeah.
Like what city or state? Right now, who's on my list? Montana.
Okay.
Because they're like, we're not giving everybody licenses.
Okay.
They're like a little leash at a time, right? And they have had a moratorium the past few years. They barely have any licenses out there. But they're also, because you could compare them with Ohio, where I'm from, and Ohio, I don't know if they're doing a good job or not, but Montana, I like honestly, their general look at life of, like, they didn't make people be, then this is also controversial, but they didn't make people be vaccinated or wear masks and things like that. So they're very about like you having the freedom to make your own choice for yourself.
Okay.
But they recognized that in cannabis, but they didn't let just everybody like Oklahoma or Michigan or whatever. They didn't have just everybody have licenses, and they were particular about who they gave them to. And in fact, I have a friend that she had lived in Montana her whole life and got a license right away and didn't use it. The state bought it back from her.
Oh.
To keep their limits low. And I thought, I've never heard of that. You know, that's pretty impressive. So I like what they're doing. I like that they're particular about what kind of extractions they're allowing. And that's obviously your local authority having jurisdiction. I want to say AHJ, but I realize not everybody, the people will go, what? So I like that they allow all different methods of extraction. They limit the number of their licenses. They allow diverse products. So there's gummies, there's rosin, and they allow people to have creative ability. But a lot of people look at Colorado for their packaging and licensing and extraction rules. And so I see the integration, a lot of it is similar as in terms of their extraction and their packaging and their products and their limits on THC, you know, like 10 milligrams and 20 and things like that. So I'm going to go with Montana.
Okay. I like that. Taylor, what about you?
I honestly am still optimistic about New York.
Me too.
I have to say, so I was living there when cannabis was legalized, and it was huge, obviously, but I was so I'd been living there for about 5 years prior to legalization. And so I covered like the legacy market. And I just think like, I fell in love with the community in New York of cannabis, and just like, it felt like coming from California and going there, you know, California obviously has a super rich cannabis community and culture that goes, you know, extends far back before legalization. But New York's just seemed like it was more community focused, and more people that were consumers were devoted and like keeping the legacy market alive. And, you know,
Honeymoon.
right.
Kind of honeymoony.
Yeah. And like the legislation, you know, it's been kind of a slow rollout and there's been a lot of hiccups and a lot of back and forth. But I'm staying optimistic because I think, you know, I feel like they have the right mindset. And as far as like letting, you know, a nonprofit open the first dispensary in the state, I think they have a lot of potential to set a really good example for the rest of the country, and just being like an super influential city and region in general. I think they have like a lot of responsibility on their shoulders, but I believe in New York, so that's kind of where my eyes are right now.
Okay, cool. What about you, Lilibel?
I love that Taylor is so optimistic, and I want to like stay on that. I love that. And I agree with Jane. I agree with what she said. I am not that happy with the way this country has treated weed still, and I think we have a long way to go. The fact that Canada has federally legalized it, and that's about all that I'm happy with in the industry right now. I still see so many people, you know, being marginalized and exploited, and until we stop doing that to people, I don't think I'm actually going to be able to say I'm super happy with our regulation.
Any state,
Yeah.
with the whole country.
No state.
You know what? I got to go out to NECAN in March. Did y'all get to go? I know you didn't go, Lilibel. I know, but did the other two go?
No.
Everyone was. It actually officially shifted my position that I had currently held at Hashfight. The original position of Hashfight was, you take these two pieces of equipment and you compete them against each other in this fun, like in this corner, you know, kind of situation. And do they do what they say they're going to do? And going to NECAN shifted my position to fighting for higher standards, for people fighting to be the best version of themselves and their company and their product, process, technique equipment that they represent, because of how positive people were, how loving and welcoming. I was going to do a battle of the brands in Boston. I was all ready. I had Orange Photonics through this incredible event with beverage infused people, Quick Liquids, and there was somebody else in there, Harbor House, and a couple other people, and they were like, oh my gosh, we love this fun battle, and people can bring their brand, and we were going to test for potency and terpenes, and then we were going to do a little ganja your style competition of your appearance and aroma and all of the, you know, how the hash was and all of that. And people did not want to compete. They wanted to bring their product and share it with everyone. And I saw all of these companies come together and were so hopeful. And it was like this moment of, finally, the East Coast is getting credit where credit's due, because there's this section, you know, you got Maine, you got parts of Pennsylvania, and then you have down into Meigs County, Ohio, which proudly is the home of Lemon G and Death Star. And I have some farmer friends that live there. And that section, just like across the country into Mendo and Humboldt and all of that, is the Emerald Triangle of the East Coast. They grow the fireweed. The best hash I've ever had in my life is from Maine. If I could add a runner-up for Maine for what they're doing right, is because people don't give a shit. They're like, I'm doing a hands-on edible class in Maine coming up, because why? Because Maine's like, okay, about everything.
With that, Maine is great. What I've seen coming out of Maine, the people coming out of Maine in the community, I love that. Yeah.
People have the fire, and they're finally like, thank God, people are finally recognizing us, and I'm here for it. There's all this hope if there's not too much red tape.
Yeah.
Yes. That.
Yes.
That's
yeah. You got to look past the red tape or cut it, or, you know, something like that.
Something. So
I am super optimistic still in that regard, and that's why I'm still in this industry. Yeah. It's the red
so
tape.
happy over there.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying, Jane, too. It's so nice to see that everyone's working together. Like, we started the podcast in 2020. And like I said, I was, mainly just like, oh, I like getting high, like this is fun. And then I was, really seeing all these really cool products that were coming out, and then finding all these women-owned cannabis brands themselves that were coming out. And I was like, oh, this could be really cool. Like, I would love to make sure that people know about these people. And, we've worked with over 30 brands since we started, and these companies are so supportive of us and what we're doing, and are happy to help in whatever way that they can, which is amazing. And yeah, I don't really think you see that too much in other industries. When I think of like music or fashion, it's all just like cutthroat, like stab you as you're walking down the runway kind of deal. I think it's because cannabis is just such like I don't know, like a happy plant. So everyone just wants to stay happy with it, which is like,
how are you going to be mad when you're high?
Exactly.
You can't.
No one ever got into a fight when they were smoking weed.
No, on weed.
And yeah, those are the brands that are gonna like survive the industry, because there's so many people trying to compete. And like, just from an interviewer perspective, I've interviewed so many different brands and companies, and whether they're, plant touching or weed adjacent companies. And you can tell the difference between people who are in it because they care and they're really passionate and they really want to, like, give something good to the community.
They're not rich.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a huge difference, and you can tell. And it's like the brands that are just kind of racing through the calls and are clearly just, looking to get in on like the green rush, like they're gonna fade out. But the ones that have the heart, like those are the ones that stick with me and like make me want to write an amazing article. So
yeah, I love that. So again, like we talked about, there's so many women-owned companies right now in the cannabis industry. We're shoving all the men out. We're making nice, beautiful things that we can smoke from and with and all that good stuff. But obviously, one of the biggest problems, or I don't know if it's a problem, but there are problems that arise from it, from being an entrepreneur, but being a woman entrepreneur, and being a woman entrepreneur in a male-dominated cannabis space. So let's start with you, Lilibel. What has your experience been getting into the extraction, distillation, cannabis industry as a woman entrepreneur?
So when I came into the industry, when I got my first job as a chemist, I was super excited. I came in with so much trust and vulnerability and was super excited to meet people. And that was quickly, I was taught that that was probably not the right thing to do. And yeah, I got pigeonholed kind of into distillation, which is how I became an expert in distillation. I came in and was so excited, had all these skills, wanted to run all the equipment. And they told me, no, you can only run the distillation. And I knew it was because they didn't have a lot of faith in my skills. So I was pretty upset about that for a long time. And I just said, okay, fine, I'm just going to get really good at this one machine. And I did. And I started my company from it. So I did manage to turn that around, but that was really hard for me. And something I've experienced consistently since then and to this day is, my ideas being kind of shoved to the side. And I do believe it has something to do with the fact that I'm a woman.
Yeah.
I've seen ideas of mine not be implemented. And then later on, I've come into my own business and people have said, oh, we're doing this great idea we came up with. You want to hear about it? And I'm like, well, actually, I came up with that like 2 years ago. I'm glad we're doing it, but it was kind of shoved to the side. And I think that that's something that women in science, I'm sure women in all kinds of industries can relate to. So yeah, that's kind of been my experience.
Okay. Yeah. Like you said, women in science. I'm a big fan of the Big Bang Theory. And I know that one of the things that they do talk about a lot in there is the prejudice, I guess you could say, towards like women in that industry. So what are some ways that you've been able to, obviously kind of being like, screw you and starting your own company is one great way to create space for yourself. But, what are some other things or advice that you would give other women in that industry on how they can move past the men or make sure that they're heard?
Absolutely. So my biggest piece of advice is learn to articulate yourself. Try not to become overcome with, the trigger of being ignored as a woman, because when we allow ourselves to be triggered, we give power over to other people. when we learn to articulate ourselves and take time to respond and document things, that's when we come into our power.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's not going to be easy. People will try to push back on you. They'll try to gaslight you. There will be times when you doubt your entire life accomplishments. And that's when you really have to dig deep and get into that articulation and calmness. And that's something I'm still working on to this day.
Yeah. Snaps for that. I mean, that was said perfectly. Taylor, what about you? I mean, I know even from like a news perspective, like that's always been, journalists have always been like male dominated as well. And I think when people think of female journalists, they think of them writing about women's issues and all of that stuff, how to get the best date and everything. But like, that's not where you're at, you know? So I'm sure you probably experienced some of this as well. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so actually, when you kind of mentioned you were going to bring up this topic, it got me thinking, and I was like, okay, I'm pretty lucky in that the editors that I work with, I'm kind of in a bubble, I guess, where they've all been super supportive of me. Most of my editors are men. I have a couple women that I freelance with, but I've never felt, you know, my ideas have been pushed aside, and I've never felt like there was any topic that was that they didn't think I was capable of covering. But even in having to say that is kind of the problem in the first place, that like, it's amazing that I'm not being held back. And then I've definitely interviewed people from various companies, which are mostly male, like run, you know, where I felt, you know, maybe a little like brushed off or pushed aside, where I've seen like the same correspondence they've had with my male colleagues were a lot more respectful. So I've kind of seen it from a distance, thankfully, because the people I work closely with, I feel like I'm super respected, and I'm given a lot of great opportunities, but I've definitely seen like the wider industry and kind of just that imbalance in cannabis and just in journalism in general. So it's definitely a male-dominated industry. Cannabis is a male-dominated industry. And I know for you, Lilibel and Jane, it's probably much more difficult because I've written a little bit about women in science and in
It's
cannabis.
all dudes.
Exactly. So it's like science in general is difficult enough for women, and then combine science and cannabis that are both male dominated. That's an uphill battle. So yeah, it's definitely difficult on all ends.
Yeah. I mean, as like you said, you know, the idea of like the privilege of not having to deal with that, like at least, you know, there's some industries that are doing a little bit better. So that's kind of a pro, I guess. You know, like, okay, we got some good editors out there. Love that. Let's get some male scientists that can support the women that are, you know, likely more intelligent than them. So
Exactly.
Jane, what about you though? What has your experience been?
So I started out in that lab, right, in 2014, 2015. And I quit that job after a few months because I was being harassed at my job.
Okay.
So I started there. And after that, I would say that I have attracted a totally different group of people. That I have either those kind of people that are like that, they don't even come my direction. Like they don't even, I don't know, they probably just don't even see me. And I don't even see them. And so it's like the universe is just eliminating that kind of situation for me. And I was on a meeting with all men last week on a call, and the one guy that I so respect and look up to, who I'm letting him lead this class, says, "Oh, well, Jane's the brains behind this operation." And I went, and my face got all red, and I'm like, wow, what a different group of people I'm attracting. Because when I was listening to Lilibel, I just think, oh, I just don't even fuck with those people. It was like my response is like, I must not even attract that. But not only that, is I like where I'm at right now. But that said, I have women that reach out to me all the time and they're like, we've been watching you forever, or, you know, XYZ. And they're like, oh my gosh, I'm in this lab right now and it's all machismo. And, you know, they don't listen to, like, exactly what Lilibel said. They don't listen to my ideas. And I have had these experiences. And then they're like, oh, we're going to go and do this. And you're like, wait a minute. I said that this would be more efficient and XYZ. And it's like, you have to go the extra mile to prove that your idea counts. When if you were a guy,
Yeah.
they're like, oh yeah, or oh, okay. And they'll engage and take you seriously. And
Yeah.
I had a realization. I'm 43 years old. I'm probably older than all of you guys, right? All of you ladies. I'm 43. I just realized the other day that if someone is more powerful, there's a whole agenda to look, and it's not just women to me. It's like, my daughter is on this whole like awesome, amazing, like pussy power, black rap music, and she's 10. Okay. And I'm like, I'm here for this because, and what I realize in listening to songs, I don't know if you know the song Django Jane is the name of the song. It's so good. Look it up. Okay. But she's talking about, we gave you life. We gave you, you know, they come from God. And there's these, black people to me are like the most powerful people. And women to me are like the most powerful of those genders or species or whatever.
Yeah.
And I realized that people will try to put that down and squish that or stomp that or eradicate that or destroy that. That is more powerful than them if they're not elevated enough to recognize that we all contribute something.
Yes.
And it's powerful.
Yes. I love that your daughter's on that train. I don't know that artist or song, but I'm definitely going to it.
She got Flo Milli. And I'm like, okay.
I do know Flo Milli, so I'm familiar.
Flo Milli, Ice Spice.
Yeah. How old is she? She must be in the Gen Z or below.
Lucy is 10. My daughter is freaking 10. And I'm allowing all of it. I majored in cultural anthropology. I feel like different words are just, it's all art and it's all poetry.
Yeah.
You just gotta be creative with how to absorb words like pussy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay.
I love that though. I think, you know, especially allowing our daughters, kind of changing the narrative around like how they view themselves in society. I think we teach a lot of shame on young girls, especially when they're younger. So I know that like I help raise my 18-year-old niece, and when I started taking over that role, I was like, okay, Jess, like, what do I really want to teach her? You know, like, what do I really want her to know about like being a woman? And I was like, one of the things, I don't want her to feel like this shame about her body, or, you know, this shame about people, again, put all these like stigmas into your heads around drugs and all that stuff. So I don't know if you've already had this conversation. I'd love to hear from everyone, you know, whether you've thought about it, haven't thought about it, but cannabis and motherhood is like a really big topic of conversation too. What do you all feel, if you've already had that convo with your kids, if you're, you know, what's the appropriate age to have that conversation, and like, what are you saying to them? You know,
my kids have grown up around cannabis for as long as they can remember. I've always made edibles and things like that. And I remember from the time my daughter could talk, I've got a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old, okay? A girl, 10-year-old girl, 13-year-old boy. And they would say from the time they could talk, is this medicated?
Okay.
I taught them to, like, I would make gummies in different shapes for them,
Mhm.
and they would know what shapes were medicated. And if they ever didn't know, they would always ask. So they have that perspective. Also, they have been around alcohol and they don't like it. And they see everybody, pretty much all of my friends that come around, everybody's in the cannabis industry, and they have been around everybody in the cannabis industry, friends. And then also they've seen people, I'll make tinctures, and I have a couple people that if they have cancer, I treat them for free because I think that life's hard enough, right? And they have seen people come into my home with stage 4 cancer and not have cancer anymore. And to me, I believe that a lot of that is mental personally, but it's my intention and my love behind making those things. But my kids are like, weed is great. like, look, nobody's mad.
Yeah.
It helps people. My mom we've never had a babysitter. My mom, can work and take care of us, and we get by. We don't have tons of money, but they see the positive aspects of cannabis in people's lives. I've talked about them consuming and the recognition of, are you doing it just to party, or are you doing it because it's medicine, right? So that and fungi, also, and them being able to say, okay, I'll be honest with you, my 13-year-old, I said, I don't want you to smoke shit from other people. That makes me really, really nervous. But I also don't want you to just come and take my weed and like steal from me or something. And that somebody could do something bad to that weed. I don't know why they would want to, but you never know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, that and Lucy, we haven't had that conversation yet, but she's around it all the time. Again, all of our friends in extraction and stuff like that, they're around it all the time.
Okay. Taylor, what about you? I don't know if you have kids. If you don't.
I don't have kids, but I can speak as a former kid. My dad, he was a huge consumer, like a really heavy consumer my whole life. And he actually hid it from me. I didn't know about it when I was young, but when I became like a teenager, I knew. And that was kind of around the time I started consuming. So I probably knew a little at that point. But anyway, when I was around like 17 or 18, we started consuming together. And he taught me a lot about weed and just like how to be safe with it. Because before then I had just been like experimenting with friends and like you said, Jane, like who knows what's out there. But yeah, with my dad, it was like just like a safe, fun space. And he taught me, like different ways of consumption and kind of how he was using cannabis to help him with, anxiety or pain or whatever the case was. And yeah, he always told me like anything you want to try, whether it's weed or like a psychedelic or something, come to me and let's do it together so that we're in a safe space. And I thought that was a great approach as a kid because, at the time it was just like, okay, whatever. But now looking back, I'm like, okay, we're going to try what we're going to try and we're going to get curious about things when we're at that age. And I think having the option to have a parent that you can trust and sort of explore those things with, and it's going to be a safe space, like that was amazing for me. So that's my perspective.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I love that. Your dad sounds super cool.
Yeah. Creates awesome trust to do other hard things.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I would be kind of like that. Well, I have been like that with my niece. I remember when I was first trying it, I felt I was trying it with like friends and stuff. And then, back then, if you're with your friends, you're getting picked on for how much you're coughing or like how high you get right away. And if you freak out. And I wish that I had had more of like a safe space to try it where there wasn't going to be, that peer pressure and stuff. So yeah, when I had that conversation with my niece, it was very much like, if you want to do it, that's fine. I would rather do it with you, so you can feel comfortable. And she gets a medicinal marijuana now for like her anxiety. And we haven't smoked together yet, which I don't know if it's more because of her being worried or what. I'm ready. I'm like, let's do it. But one of the
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
love the idea of like the safe space for, kids to, try it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I would have been more likely to be more extreme and who knows, rebelling, if that wasn't the case. So I think
Yeah.
it just kind of mellowed me out.
Definitely. What about you, Lilibel?
I totally agree with Taylor. I was raised in the opposite situation. I was raised in a home of shame and alcohol consumption and total rebel right here. Extreme. I know that do what I say, not what I do does not work. Kids do emulate their parents. I don't have kids myself, but I do intend to be an example to children if I decide to have them. And I know that my kids will emulate me. I'm just like my parents, good and bad. So,
Yeah.
I'm a strong believer in harm reduction. So I really want my kids to view me as someone that they could come to. I want people to view me as someone that they could come to for harm reduction.
Definitely. Yeah, I think really like the fear behind cannabis is just the unknown, and not creating a safe space for people to even, like if you don't know the answer to something, people get on you about it. And so they're less likely to want to ask things. They don't want to seem uncool if they're asking like, what's the difference even between like sativa and indica? They're embarrassed to. So instead they choose not to, and then they get pushed towards potentially if they're trying to find something to help with an ailment, they get pushed to pharmaceuticals. And we all know, don't get me started on big pharma, but
That's a whole nother podcast.
that's a whole nother episode.
Seriously.
But it's really all about the education for it. And I think you ladies are doing an amazing job at helping bridge that gap for education and making sure that people are getting the right amounts of everything, the right products to help, and building that community that we definitely need to see, especially for female consumers. As a last minute question, and this might be a big question, and I have an idea of what Lilibel's answer is going to be, so I'll have you go first anyways. What are some holes that you are seeing in the industry, and what are some of the ways that you are potentially helping to fill those holes?
So that's definitely a big question. My number one thing I'm going to say is federal legalization needs to happen. I do not like the way this country treats people. We need to release all people still incarcerated due to nonviolent cannabis crimes. Stop handing licenses over to the good old boys club. That would be great.
Yep.
And make social equity licensing real. How can we as consumers make a difference in this problem? And I would say, look at the companies that you're buying from. Are they women or minority owned? And if they are not, how are they contributing to the problem, through philanthropy or, education, whatever? Who are these companies? Like, I like certain companies. I love New Raw Labs in Ohio. I'm sure Jane has heard of them. All women owned, women operated, love that. So I feel like that's kind of like a small thing that we as consumers can do.
Okay, great. Jane, what are your thoughts?
So I love what Lilibel said about federal legalization. That's my problem is I not a problem, but what makes our different strengths is that Lilibel might be more of like I never thought about the broad picture, right? I'm narrowly focused, right? So to me, some of the holes that I see are definitely not equal treatment across the board for things, right? I like the idea of the social equity and minority and women owned. And it kind of hit me when she said that I don't necessarily think about that when I'm buying things for my kids, and that I can show my daughter, for instance, she read this, she got into something at school about fair trade chocolate.
Okay.
And I swear to you, anytime we ever get chocolate, she has to know. Does it say it on the package? Can we look it up? I want to make sure this is fair trade. And it honestly never occurred to me until Lilibel said that I could be instilling that in my children, and that could be something I'm making a difference that's just within my family that'll have a ripple effect, but also that's a driving force for me personally behind Hashfight, is that if I can be a woman, putting women on, supporting women or minorities or anything that's disadvantaged in any way whatsoever, that you can put your energy towards that, and you can expose things that are like good old boys things, and also encourage and lead the charge in people being the best version of their product or their process or their technique. And in that way, a lot of what I do is create cool content on even equipment running, but I say things like, oh my gosh, this is a woman-owned business, or this business is from this part of the country, and things like that. And I think really shedding light, normalizing it in your community. Mm-hmm. And another thing came to mind. There is a woman named Shannon Donnelly, and she's out of Denver, Colorado. And she put Hashfight on with the city of Denver as a part of her Cannabis Cares program that she helped create, which you basically get points if you're anything that's cannabis licensed, dispensary, cultivation, extraction, any kind of brand, anything that deals with cannabis in the state of Colorado. You get points essentially that show that you're doing stuff like plaque kind of thing in your community. And what she did was put us in a directory, as in Colorado, I'm a minority owned business because I'm a woman, and brands of any kind can get credit with the state for doing business with Hashfight. So Shannon is somebody that is also making a huge difference in highlighting, these different groups that are minority or social equity type of things.
I love that. Yeah, that's a really great idea to encourage people to really start working with these brands. So kudos to Shannon.
And Taylor might say it's sad that we even have to do that, and she wouldn't be wrong. But that said, at least somebody's making a difference with the holes that they see.
Definitely.
Right?
Definitely. Yeah, Taylor, what about you? What are you seeing in the industry?
Yeah, well, specifically at the Bluntness, my coverage has focused heavily on releasing incarcerated people who are, still being charged for cannabis crimes, and also social equity throughout the industry. That's a huge passion of mine, to always write about, and to always try to uplift legacy operators or anyone who's kind of, has anything to do with social equity or LPP, Last Prisoner Project, anything like that is super important to me. But beyond that, I think there's kind of a dangerous new trend of how cannabis is being marketed, as far as, I don't know if you've seen anything around like diet weed, where people are kind of isolating specific cannabinoids that are supposedly appetite suppressants.
Like skinny girl type of vibe.
Yeah, exactly. Like they're trying to do that with weed, and it's, it's not super prevalent yet, but I have seen like a few different PR emails or whatever, like with that sort of marketing. And I'm like, that is so not what this plant is about, or what this industry or community is about. And it's just like really scary to see that. So I think it's important I'm actually writing a piece right now. It's going to be for MedMen's blog Embers. Check it out in like a month. Just about like cannabis and diet culture, and how that is like not. I mean, personally, I actually used cannabis to recover from an eating disorder many years ago. And I know a ton of people who have used it to help them get over, body dysmorphia or body image issues, and to have people start to market it as like something that can, help you lose weight quick or whatever is like, it's so not what this community is about. So I think like staying true to what cannabis is and like, you know, spreading love with cannabis and using it as medicine and not just like getting it mixed in with these weird toxic
Diet.
Yeah.
Bullshit.
Yeah.
I had never heard of that.
Yeah.
I
Look,
have
diet
that.
weed, look it up.
I have with THCV specifically, I saw it being marketed
That
as
it's an
an
appetite suppressant.
Mhm.
That is crazy. Yeah, I mean, again, like there are so many issues we need to address in this industry.
But look
And-
at where we are on the spectrum, though. We're worried about shaming with diet weed, and then somebody in another state is worried about they would go to prison, or in Vietnam losing your, was that Vietnam? Losing your life, you know?
Yeah.
Like, think about, like, and we're like, diet weed, but honestly, that's fascinating.
Yeah, that is. I mean, again, I think like the biggest outside of obviously legislation, prison reform, all of that stuff is the only way to help is really education. So I will, of course, continue to do my part in helping to bring conversations like these to light, which I think is super important. I know that you ladies are going to be doing the same on your end, and we'll continue to, you know, fight the good fight, as we say. History repeats itself, so we're back to saying things like that. But Lilibel, where can everybody find you and follow you online, socials, all that good stuff?
Yeah, so my company is on Instagram. It's just at Beaker and Wrench, and our website is www.beakerwrench.com.
Awesome. Jane, what about you?
On Instagram, YouTube.com, everything is at Hashfight, or just Hashfight, everything.
And Taylor, what about you?
Same here. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter. And then my website is just taylorengle.com. It's got links to all my social handles and links to all the places I write for as well.
Perfect. And of course, you guys can always follow us at High On Feminism. Be sure to check out all of the new episodes for season 3 that are dropping over the next few months. And of course, check out some of our past episodes of High Talks. Again, thank you ladies so much for being here today. I appreciate it. And I look forward to staying connected and doing more.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.